Good morning, everybody. How are you doing today? Thanks for joining me. What is inside us? That's what I titled this today. And a few different ways we could go with it. I was thinking to myself, like, well, maybe it sounds like an anatomy lesson, like, liver and pancreas, and we could get into that. But no. And I was thinking, well, what are we putting inside of us? Healthy food, a big focus of mine. Obviously, if we're on a journey of wellness, uh, we got to eat healthy food is probably the very most important thing. But I wanted to go a little deeper today and put it on the title image. The human spirit is in us. And that's what I wanted to dive in today. If we're on a journey of wellness, we're trying to go into a different place, a better place where we are feeling contentment. The big thing that I try to help people do. Find a space of wellness and contentment as we move powerfully in a direction of better health. Okay, the human spirit can help drive us to that place. So I hope you find these thoughts, encouraging. And the inspiration behind those thoughts, I'm going to give you some thoughts, an excerpt from this wonderful book that I read recently, The Light Eaters. Just finished it up yesterday. Christy is with us. Good morning. Hello. Can't I get that? There we go. Good morning. This was a beautiful book, and I'll tell you more about it. But first, hey, I'm going to grab a coffee, or tea or water, your favorite calorie-free beverage of choice. If you're new, this sort of little program that I'm doing, session, I refer to it as fasting space, as an opportunity to come together around a food-free space, which is how I think of a fasting space. Fasting space, basically nothing. It's just an open space. And what's so interesting, our culture has determined that that is not something that you want to have. Jen is with us. Hello, good morning. So glad to have you here. We're in kind of a consumption culture. Consumption culture always come around the idea of like we need to be eating something, consuming something. And my assessment of the situation is that this is not really serving us very well. And so this is a little bit of a counterculture move to me. Say, let's come around a fasting space that can be quite pleasant, quite nice. Grab a coffee, and let's center ourselves on a health practice that has been very overlooked in our society. From my point of view, a fasting practice, opening up space, allowing the body to burn off the excess, get into kind of that reset mode. I like reset mode, a nice way to think of it, the medical term autophagy, which is the pathways the body starts activating to clear out the excess, the dysfunctional, reset everything, get back to a baseline. That is a beautiful, healthy space. And I can see a future, where more and more people embracing that, and it's creating a culture of health. So that's kind of the idea from it. So, so this book, I want to share this thoughts with you. Light Eaters, if you're looking for some thoughtful, summer reading, kind of on the lighter side, that this whole book just kind of exuded lightness and positivity. The author, I think they said, was like an environmental reporter, and they were very discouraged, covering all these bad things that are happening in the world, pollution and destruction of habitats and all this. So, like, let's just dive in on something positive, and try to find the most positive thing, and then just, focus on that and make the best good of it possible. And I personally really love that whole attitude, and that's an attitude that we could take toward, our wellness journey for sure, because there's a lot of difficulties and challenges always as we try to move toward health, a lot of barriers, especially when we're living in an unhealthy culture, trying to steer us off the course. And so keeping centered on a positive vision, that is definitely a good way to keep you on track. And especially, I mean, in today with, I mean, just the money and the advertising and everybody trying to sell you the golden supplement that is going to, you know, fix everything. And it's very hard to figure out what is even true in the world, you know? So to me, it's like, okay, sometimes I've had the thought like our society has taken the baseline view that, okay, 3 meals a day is normal. And then every deviation from that is some sort of abnormal thing. I was like, that's not working very well for people. To me, fasting is kind of the baseline. Like fasting says, okay, the body is here, the body has resources, the body is strong, and we can be grounded in that. That's like a North Star. You know, okay, nothing bad is coming into the system. The body is amply powered and we're good. And then we add to it. Obviously, we need nutrition, we need nutrients, we need things coming in. But how much do we add to it? That's like a dial, and we find the right level for us. So that's kind of how I think of it. Okay, to center our sort of discussion today, I want to, this is right at the end of the book. I just finished this up. And this woman is on an expedition on a kind of a survey. I don't know, where did they say? Costa Rica or something like this. They're heading down into a cave. And so it's totally dark. They got their lights on. They're studying plants. And part of it, okay, there's all these bats, you know, in the cave. Bats are flying around. They're eating all these fruits. And one of the effects or services they provide is they eat the fruits and then they deposit the seeds all around. So they're studying, I don't know, I guess the way the bats are eating and distributing seeds. And so they get way down in the bat cave, okay? And the light, they couldn't quite see what was going on. They stepped in, and to make a long story short of it, she's like, "Oh, it's like all this mossy thing. What is it? I'm sinking in." Okay, there was a whole foot deep of bat droppings on the floor. She's like sinking in. So gross, okay? And that's where we'll pick it up. So she's coming in. Oh, yeah. And then the lights shine across the room as they're looking in. They see the bats. Okay. But all the seeds that normally, okay, the point, they're supposed to be spreading the seeds around the forest. But now they're in the bat cave, like a mile underground or whatever, and it's totally dark. And so all the seeds are sprouting up in the total darkness. Here we pick it up. This was a ghost forest, haunting in its inevitable futility. Did they say it already? That it's all, there's no color, they're just these white little shoots? Yeah. Oh, they say it here. Slender stems, a foot tall, pure white, topped with a single leaf. Okay? A ghost forest. The fuel from the seeds would run out and they would die soon. Why did they bother coming up at all, I wondered. After everything I'd learned about the good sense of plants, it seemed to me I was looking at plant stupidity. Yet it was also somehow relatable. I looked again. It was clear they had tried their absolute best. They'd grown as tall and slender as structurally possible, using all of their finite energy to look for any scrap of light. They put out only 1 or 2 leaves, pennants of hope that some photon might fall on them after all. Their strategy was remarkably sensible. I didn't know if all the seeds were from the same species of plant or not. Fruit bats tend to eat lots of different fruits, so it seemed unlikely. Yet every single one of these white seedlings looked the same. Perhaps they'd all converged on the same form because this was the best one for survival. They adapted as best they could to their situation. They put everything they had into the wisest possible shape. Still, it wasn't enough, but that was not the point. Perhaps intelligence of any kind is not measured in success, but in the approach. Would any of us, were we the plants in this situation, have done any differently? They tried to survive in an inhospitable landscape the best way they knew how. I felt moved by this. It was a craning toward life, even in the face of impossible conditions. Our own humanity is found as much in our achievements in a harsh and complex world as it is in our limitations, our frailties, and our faults. We are no less human for them. Perhaps this amorphous quality of plant intelligence that I'm trying to grasp, this liveliness and beinghoods that plants unequivocally have, has as much to do with plant trying, plant testing, and plant failing. After all, who we are shows itself not just in the outcomes of our goals, but in the paths we take to get there. The trying says more about what is inside us than does the success. So I thought that was just it was a very moving passage, personally for me to read through, especially after the whole flow of the book. The book, so interesting. One of the kind of under themes of the book is that, okay, plant intelligence, like we haven't been able to see it. People have not been able to see it or appreciate it because we can't. No one has been able to imagine or define a type of intelligence that doesn't just equate to human intelligence. And every time somebody tries to put the picture together of what plants are doing and suggests, like, this is pretty intelligent, they're making decisions. Like, they can see light and move toward it, and they can hear things, and they have basically a plant language system, which is the chemicals that they produce that helps them to talk to each other. Like, that's wild, but they're like, it's not human, so like they don't have a brain, they don't have a conscious experience, presumably, that is like us. So we say, well, it can't be intelligent. But you look at the intentionality and that passage, just the striving, the craning toward life. It's like a little mirror, I think, like she's casting on like what we're trying to do, right? Because we are doing the same thing the plant is trying to do in this difficult situation in the cave, right? We are taking the resources that we have and we're trying to do our very best, right? It can be one of the juxtapositions that I've tried to express on this channel is somewhat of a paradox between better health is not far away. I love that. Health is a state of mind. It's a way of being. We're journeying toward a destination, and it's like the cliche phrase, like the journey is the destination, right? The joy is in the journey. That is also then, set next to sometimes like the actual destination of the journey. Like it can be a ways away, right? And so it's kind of like we're already there, but not yet. And we're on the way, which is like the path, but like it's a ways. And so finding the joy on the journey, realizing the destination is in every step, is the mindset or the part of the practice that helps you actually to do it and get there. And so like bringing that future forward into the present, that's how you find contentment on a long journey. So someone says, I have a lot of weight to lose. I'm very unhealthy. Okay, you need to bring the healthy mindset in now, experience it now, and then that helps you manifest that reality in your life. Plants trying to do that. To me, I think the way they actually end this, like the last sentences even, a single plant is a marvel. A community of plants is life itself. It's the evolutionary past and future entangled into a riotous presence, which we ourselves are also entangled. This stretches the mind. Plants give us a chance to see the system in which we live. Yeah, reading through it, I mean, I got a degree in biology at one time, but like we never dove in. And I don't think people didn't realize it. I was getting a biology degree 20 years ago, and I don't think in an entire biology undergraduate degree, we even had a single discussion of plant communication. Like it's on nobody's radar. I think that's kind of like we've thought of human society as like we are humanity, we are here, we are different than everything else. Like we're separate from it and better than it. And when we're talking about human society, we're talking about what we're building, not what the earth is, not what we're a part of, but like how we can do it better. And we're building our own superstructure here. And we're like separating out and moving beyond. And if that's your mindset, like, what do you even care what a plant has to say, or how we integrate? See, from my point of view, this is one of the big underlying and unappreciated mindsets that have led us into this difficult situation where the majority of people are struggling with health difficulties because we've separated ourselves from the systems of this planet that created and sustain us. And that cannot be a healthy thing. So when you start to see it that way, say, what would it look like to reintegrate into that in some fashion if dishealth has come because we have not appreciated the incredible abundance and miracles and that the earth provides for us and that we are in fact a part of it. We think we can eat synthetic food and bring it into our bodies and that is going to be better than like the natural cycle of food that we have eaten forever. It's like you read a book like this, you start to really like get into that mindset of how connected everything is. Everything connected. And, there's a fascinating part even in it where they're talking about like, it gets really hard to even define, like the closer you look, that there are in fact individual species. Like they started, looking at all these examples of plants that are like these hybrid symbiotic relationships of plants and bacteria and plants and fungi, plants and other plants, plants living inside of plants. And they say, but like this is pretty much like a person, right? Like we're full of like bacterias and all these things that do most of our digestion for us. We did a session here a couple months ago on the microbiome and how intrinsically connected the health of our gut microbiota is to so many things, including our mental health. They're altering, serotonin production and all of this. And that everywhere in the world is like that, these symbiotic relationships that we're not really individual species, we're these hybrid symbiotic relationships. These are beautiful thoughts, and there also seem to be such a more complex yet broader reflection of the reality of the situation. And when you start to look at it, say, okay, we are these incredibly complex beings that are themselves relational in and amongst themselves. To me, it inspires me to say, like, we need to really dive in on this and we need to take care of this. If this is a system in relationships, okay, relationships have to be built and fostered. And if actual health is about the proper communication and functioning and running of relationships between actual species that are in and within us and are us in a way. Like we saw in that talk I did, I looked through that paper, okay, that there are communications within the GI system. I think it was enterochromaffin cells and all these things that the brain is actually directly communicating neurologically with the gut microbiome and also hormonally, chemically. This is what the book is getting into, not really in the human body, but between plants, that we haven't appreciated. Like, we're just getting the technology to be able to distinguish the incredible variety of the types of chemicals and signaling that plants use. And plants signal and communicate not just between other plants, like of the same plant, like a dandelion to a dandelion, right? But from a plant to all kinds of other plants, communicating messages about where is water, how much water, what what the bugs are doing, where, all these things. Well, one of the most fascinating things, a plant can tell in multiple different ways whether the plants that are next to it are like its brothers and sisters or not, or its parents. Like, it's wild. It's relations in any kind. And like they've shown it in sunflowers that if you plant relatives of sunflowers, it will grow its leaves and they'll coordinate them so they don't shade out their siblings. Nobody really knows how they do it, but they definitely do it. And if you put like very far removed types of them, they'll stop behaving that way. And they'll compete with each other, which is very, very interesting. And so if plants can do that, and they can communicate complex ideas like that between different types of plants, like it starts to give you a flavor of the types of communication that are happening within our own body. And to me, that is the type of thought or experience that can just give us like this marveling of the grandeur and incredible, both the incredible ability of the human body to participate in something like that, which we've definitely seen that it can do, and then the ability that we have, to be part of that. And to me, that's the thing that can really inspire health and a health journey. But tell me what you think. Do you have what reflections? Do you have reflections or thoughts as I'm talking through that? Does that resonate in some fashion? Or have you read this book? Let me know your thoughts. I would love to hear it. One of the other points in the book that was so interesting, they were down, I think, in Peru, and they found this vine. There's this tiny vine, and they're trying to figure out, okay, when this vine grows by a certain tree, it will grow up the tree, and then it will make leaves that look like the tree that it's growing. And they've documented at least 20 different trees, and it will make the leaves of any tree it grows on, including if it's between two trees and it sends one arm up one, the leaves will look like that tree, and then it sends its leaves up the other, and the leaves will look like that tree. Nobody has any idea how they do it, so there's a bunch of different theories of it. And including one is like, does it actually directly see it? Like, because the pattern can be so perfectly copied. Does it actually see it and then copy it? A fascinating theory people are testing. And then another theory, like they have these little hooks as they're climbing up the tree. They're putting little hooks in that they kind of burrow in. Are they assessing in some fashion the DNA of the tree that they are climbing up, and then copying that and using it as a blueprint to make their own leaves? Like, that's radical. And then the third one, which is the most fascinating probably in our context of saying like, okay, we want to be advancing human health, helping ourselves, okay? There's a microbiome of the plant, okay? And it's been shown that the microbiome in plants can transfer like little DNA segments. And so another theory that they're testing is that that this plant is sampling the microbiome of the plants around it and then using that genetic information that is being exchanged to actually make their leaves. I have to look it up. They have the name. It's so interesting to look at the pictures of it. But just the idea that any of those things are true is some of the most fascinating things. And then just to think about what that means in our own system. I mean, I tend to favor listening through it because I'm kind of like fascinated by microbiome and what that means for our health, and I'm reading about it. Like the idea that there could be that much information and sophisticated communication happening that could allow a plant, and they've taken it to other parts in the world where it has not, evolved or is not designed, whatever you believe to be, and it'll copy anything else that it's never seen and that it's had no experience with. It's like, how does it do that? Like that much information can be communicated, you know, to a creature without a brain, okay? And then here we have things like that going on within our body. How much information is actually that we're totally unaware of is being communicated by the food that we eat through actually a microbiome? Like if that ends up being true, and a microbiome of a plant can communicate enough information to like help a plant transform itself like a chameleon into like a totally different organism. How much you start to see the potential power. I mean, we know it's true, right? We are what we eat. And like, that you have to eat healthy food in order to be healthy, right? You have to bring health into the body. That is a process. To me, this sort of thing, I hope it's inspiring you, okay? When you look at your diet, what are the things you are eating? Are you getting natural, whole foods, like that came from the earth in a natural way, like that still have their genetic information intact, so that if, like, think of a pepper, think of a delicious carrot, think of a deep leafy green thing, like something that grew and has its cells and maybe even its microbiome still intact about this beautiful thing that you can build into your body. That is something that is inspiring me. I spent, a couple days after I did this, I was like, I need to order some more whole food cookbooks. That's what I'm going to be exploring. And then studies that we have looked at in previous sessions, that fasting itself, right, also affects the microbiome in positive ways. And so we want to build out these sort of relationships. And so it's clear to me. Is it clear to you? Let me know, okay? Fasting can be a very helpful process, if you didn't know, okay, to lose weight and bring health to the body. One of these times I do a session, I've been collecting a few papers. Fasting also helpful amazingly to build muscle. This is the sort of thing when you balance it right, because we're getting the hormones lined up right, okay? When we're in a cycle where our hormonal rhythms are totally out of whack, we're stressed out, okay? That's like a whole zone. When we're stressed and we're pumping out cortisol, okay, cortisol, everybody knows, is a stress hormone, and it promotes weight gain. But it also creates an environment that is muscle wasting, okay? We want to be shutting that down, right? That's part of finding a space of peace and contentment. Okay, we want to reset the hormonal structure, right? What is the best environment for muscle building? Okay, testosterone and growth hormone, right? And insulin is opposed to this also. And so we're trying to get to the other part of the cycle. When I've heard people, be critical of fasting. So you fast too much, you're gonna burn up your muscle. Now, in the long term, this is true, right? If you are fasting, extended fasting, and never eating, of course, you can take anything to an extreme. You take anything too far, and of course, you don't want to do that. If you are pushing things beyond some sort of line, we did, I think, was it last fall? I was going through different studies on restarting the metabolism, getting that metabolic effect, the reset going. And there's a curve to it, okay? Like when you are doing standard dieting, okay, when you're calorie restricted without fasting, that's creating this metabolic slowing, and because the body's trying to conserve that energy. And when you fast, all of a sudden you can break the system out of that. When you say, oh, there's nothing here, that's sending the hormonal signal to the body. Like, hey, you can access this energy now, and then the metabolism can improve. That curve will go back down. Like if you fasted for weeks and weeks, okay, that curve will go back down. And the body will be like, oh, well, we haven't had any food in here for quite a long time. We got to go back into a conserving mode. This is why I stick with simple fasting and why I don't harp on anybody to have any sort of terribly rigid dogmatic routine about it. Because have food, okay, we need that. That's the balance. Have food, have a fasting space, helps to keep everything into balance. And one of the things that can balance is hormones that support muscle building. Body wants us to be strong. And that is the natural state of things. Not going to do you any good in a harsh environment. Think 10,000 years ago, we're hunter-gatherers. If every time we ran out a little bit of food, our body just started burning up the muscle, going to do us no good. Clearly, the system cannot be set up to run that way, and it's not. You run out of food, the body thinks, okay, we got to like triage, right? We have to do everything in the very most efficient way. And the very most efficient thing, burn up all the sugar first. That's the easy energy, the quick hits. Body's burning up the sugar first. Then the body says, we have to save our muscle. Muscle is what is going to actually help us get more food, whether that's traveling to food, fighting to get food, gathering, picking, climbing, whatever it is to get food. You got to be strong. You got to have muscle to do that. And so the hormones in a fasting space, especially the beginning of the fasting space, that's why I say simple fasting. It's like fasting within a day or so, because then all the hormones are lined up to say, protect the muscle, burn up body fat. And the hormones that are protect muscle, which is growth hormone and testosterone, okay, are the hormones that help you build muscle also. So, fascinating, I say. Those are the thoughts that are coming out of this book for me today. The Light Eaters, How the Unseen World of Plant Intelligence Offers a New Understanding of Life on Earth. Yeah, it's that understanding that this spirit of life is here. We need to stop thinking about or organizing ourselves as breaking away from this. Start thinking about how we reintegrate ourselves thoughtfully into it, what that can look like in our own life. I think we're talking through more whole, unprocessed foods, more thinking of the beauty and the grandeur and the incredible opportunity we have to be here in this beautiful place. More fasting if you're struggling to lose weight, leaning into it as an idea and finding that balance, which is something I really want to help people do. Let me know if you have questions. How do you do that? And I'd be happy to dive in further on that. That's something I spend a lot of time helping people tease apart, in a consulting. It's hard to give, there's no one broad answer that's going to work for everybody because everybody's body and system and history at a little different place. So where exactly a balance point is that will help any one individual person. For some people, I see, for example, some people just make a simple switch, 3 meals a day to 2 is the only switch they ever made, and they slowly and steadily lose weight doing that, and it's like they never do anything else. Other people do that and they don't experience that. I wish it was, exactly that easy. Other people don't experience that. Other people, you got to move that dial in a different place. And then because part of what we have as different situations, we're all eating different things, and we have different amounts of exercise. There's a lot of variables here. We're getting different quality of sleep. Maybe we have a different microbiome within us, and that is something that has been totally off the map uh, for people. How much does our microbiome set this? And so maybe that's an area from this inspiring sort of passage to dive into and say, are you doing things that care for the microbiome? And what are things like that that you can do? Eating some fermented foods like kimchi, I think the evidence is best, sauerkraut, kefir, things like this, kombucha, getting life-giving things to our microbiome, I think a very sensible way to go. Jen says, what about doing OMAD? Would that be a good thing to do? Well, I would say it certainly can be a good thing to do. And, I come up, with situations where you say it wouldn't be a good thing to do, which would just basically be you don't want to do it. Okay. I never want anyone, for some people, okay, OMAD is very simple. For some people, OMAD is like very intense. And the biggest thing that I want for somebody who is saying, I'm trying to lean into fasting, I'm trying to learn how to do it. I hear, what you're saying, what other people are saying, obviously fasting and OMAD out in the world. I never want people to be overwhelmed or intimidated by it. To me, a fasting practice is like just embracing a spirit of openness. Fasting space is nothing. It's just a practice of nothing. It's finding comfort and ease in a space of openness. And the point of view that I want people always to have is that it should be a stress-reducing practice. I never want people to be stressed out by doing a fasting. It's like the whole opposite, because if you're stressed out by something, you're never going to stick with it, and you're creating stress hormones that are counter to the actual process of how we gain access to body fat. We've had a perspective in our culture that losing weight is just about calories, and we have to get the calories right and everything is fine. Okay? But everybody knows, kind of at least subconsciously, okay, that doesn't work. It's not working well for people. People spent billions upon billions of dollars and hours doing every kind of dieting and having just mediocre at best results that don't seem to stick. Imagine a person who is, completely stressed out and they've got terrible situations going on in their life and they're all these things. It's like, this is a very common situation when people gain weight. And part of it is from stress eating, but nobody studied this that I'm aware of, but I'm sure part of it is also from the standpoint, all the hormones in the body, the cortisol pouring out, that cortisol is sending the message, store any extra energy away. Okay, just store it away. We got to save it for later. And we want to create a different hormonal environment in the body. Part of the idea of what I'm trying to do, read a book like this and talk about these sort of things is like, how do we do that? And aren't things actually more complex biologically than we often think, especially if actually our microbial health is a big contributor too. Okay, so that's a whole zone. We can talk a lot more about that. So reasons not to do it. You find it stressful. Now, going to the other side, what I'll tell people is I've worked with, I don't track or count these things. I started, when I started doing this, I started tracking, like, oh, how many people am I working with? But by the time I got, over 100 people doing fasting, I'm like, I can't manage this. Like, I got too much to do in my primary care practice. And so I was like, it'll, like fasting, right? It's just, all this is just going to have to be an open thing. Hundreds of people doing OMAD, having incredible results with it. And I always have people say, why walk before you, or why run before you can walk, right? So I have people ease into things. The times when I tell people to do an OMAD is like, you started eating twice a day, you got an eating window, you dialed that in, you're getting 16 to 18 hours of open space, you feel fine, you're not struggling with it, it's not stressful, but you're not getting the results you want. Like if you say like, okay, I switched in. I used to eat 3 times a day with snacks also, and, I can do it, but, like, it's kind of been like a big nothing, like, I'm just not getting the results I want, and you feel open to it. That's the time where you say, "Do an OMAD," because okay, if you're eating twice a day and you're feeling good and it's not hard, and that's the thing, that's another variable, you wanna have, like, the energy. Most people, I'll tell you, and see if you experience this, most people who've never practiced any type of fasting, you make a change, there's like a little hurdle. So when I say don't, I never want people doing a fasting if it's stressful. The line there is that there's a line between overwhelmingly stressful and difficult. And I've done a couple videos on that recently. The one, fasting like a weight loss champion, where I was talking about my experience in track. Like, people run track is a very difficult thing to do. Sprint as fast as you can around a track. You feel terrible when you're doing it. But then, it's also fun and a challenge. And that's like also a good way to look at a fasting. Is that something that should be a personal challenge, fun, okay to move through a little bit of a different space, even if it does feel uncomfortable, as long as you say, this is how I frame it. This is what it feels like to bring my body back into balance. And that is often true. And for us to go through that, you say that's the barrier to entry sometimes, is to say, okay, we have to pass through a space where it doesn't feel completely normal, and knowing that it can get better on the other side, and it can help you to feel calm and comfortable as you can be through it. And most people experience that the most intense parts of any sort of dietary change are the first couple times you do it, and then it starts to get a little better, and then it comes to feel normal over time. And if you can work through that, most people experience that they don't feel worse, if anything. Most people say, "Oh, I don't feel worse," like doing it. Many people say, "Oh, I do have a little more energy," and that's the sort of space that we're looking for, where it's like you can do it, you're feeling okay doing it, and hopefully the energy is improving. Absolutely. Oh, and then the other part of that. Yeah. Okay, so OMAD, if you can adjust to 2 meals, and we'll get to some of this in these questions, okay? You adjust to 2 meals. You say, "I'm feeling okay, but not getting results." That is the time where you say, "Yes, I want to increase the intensity of this." You can increase that in a couple different ways. You can just tighten those 2 meals, and that's like the way to step toward it. Now, there's nothing wrong with just stepping from 2 meals a day to 1. And you can do that just 1 day a week. Like, if it takes a lot to psych yourself up for it, you say, "Monday, I'm gonna hit it. I'm gonna do a 1 meal." And then you say, "Okay, I make it through." Then you kind of fall back to 2. And maybe you do that on some frequency. And maybe you try to do it, you say. And they say, "The first time I try to do it, can't do it." No problem, right? You're not comparing yourself to anybody else. Maybe nobody even knows that you're doing it. So never stress out about it. I've talked to people where they're like, "Oh, I try to do this," and then they say, I'm too hungry. I don't feel well. I can't do it." People feel very discouraged. I never want anybody to feel, never, if you're in that scenario, never feel discouraged in something like that, because just think of the population of people who are trying to lose weight. 100 million people, and very few people, relatively, even trying something like that. So I tell people, give yourself a big pat on the back, because, like, you are trying to do something countercultural. You're moving in a direction when maybe your friends and family say, "Oh, don't do that. That is not the thing that we do in this country," or whatever, or you talk to your doctor. He's like, I've surveyed when I've been giving talks, how many doctors, will talk to their patients about a fasting practice or intermittent fasting as like a viable thing. And I've gotten results around 10% or so. And so, it's definitely out there. Sometimes you run into people who are open to talking about it, but lots of times you don't. And you run into a whole spectrum, of people on that. So always you should be encouraged if you're moving toward it, if it's difficult, be encouraged. Say, you know what? I'm like the plant in the cave, right? I'm trying my best. I'm in a difficult situation. Like you're like a seed planted into this culture. You didn't choose to be here, right? But here we are. And it's like we have to make the best of our situation, okay? So be very encouraged. The way you give it actually your best shot is to keep your spirits up, right? To give it your best. Recognize, I have a spirit of life flowing through me. I'm going to give everything my best try. I'm not going to be discouraged. Um, I saw a quote this week. Where was it? It was like I think it said like a Mexican proverb. It said they tried to bury us, but they didn't realize that we were seeds. I thought that was so beautiful. They didn't realize we were seeds, and we're going to sprout and break through, and it's going to be beautiful. Okay. Okay, so going in order. Would it be a good thing to do? If you're struggling to lose weight, eating twice a day, it's one of the things that you could do, right? We got this control panel. There's different levers to pull. One lever to pull is dialing in intensely on making sure you're not getting any processed food at all in, and just dial all of the synthetic stuff and all the chemicals out, And then another thing to do is saying, okay, now you're getting some fasting space, right? If you're eating twice a day, you've put it in a window, from that sort of space, that's when I would start to tell people, okay, can you add in some exercise in that look, especially in the fasting space, very cautiously, very gently, talk with your medical team if you have any concern about any sort of thing. You got to walk before you can run. But when you're opening up that food-free space, now hormonally, everything in the body is about accessing body fat. That's the time when you some slow, steady exercise, taking a walk, okay, that's when the body says, okay, we need some energy here. Let's suck it out of the body fat now. There's nothing in the way. When you exercise after you're eating, okay, body's working on burning that food. Hormones are blocking access in general to body fat because they say we got to burn the food first. Now, burning through food also can be a helpful thing. But putting the demand directly on the system to burn through the excess, very powerful state. The most difficult state to exercise in, but the most powerful. So you got to train your way to it. And then, yes, teaching yourself to do one meal a day. One meal a day, like pretty much a very core, I think, of like a simple fasting process, because I've had people lose hundreds of pounds switching in the one meal a day, a very, very powerful state. And so because it's a powerful state, I say approach it in a very thoughtful way, and use it to help reduce the stress in your life. So I would say lean into it and try it, and see what kind of results you have, and don't think, oh, everything is going to happen within the first month. It's like, see what happens the first month, learn from it. I encourage people to journal about their experience. Feel free to share your experience here. I'm always happy to hear people's experience, whether it's good or bad. And you say, I'm having a difficult experience. Of course, share it and we talk through it. The levels beyond OMAD, just to set it, in perspective, would be to fast for one day. Okay, if you fast for a day, which people define in different ways, but I would say no breakfast, no lunch, no dinner. So if you had dinner one day and then you got up and you didn't eat during that day, then you're going to eat again, maybe breakfast the next day or maybe lunch when you normally would. And that gets you actually out toward 36 or more hours, would be like a 1 day fast. So like if you eat one day, once in a day, it's kind of 24 hours around till you eat the next day. And some people would say, well, are you really fasting in the 5 or 6 hours after that meal? So it gets a little fuzzy how you define it. But that's how I would start. You get toward 36 hours, a 1 day fast. The most aggressive end of what I would consider a simple fasting is alternate daily fasting, where you're like, you fast a day and then you eat on some frequency on a day, and you go back and forth like that. And we've had a few people come through on the channel over the last couple years here practicing alternate daily fasting. When you move beyond that, where you're fasting multiple days, that's a perfectly legitimate thing to do, and it's no problem. I've done that. I've experienced that. To me, that's moving like more toward like advanced fasting. It's not really simple fasting. And so, in my experience running a weight management clinic, by the time people get to alternate daily fasting, I've never had anyone who's actually done it who didn't lose significant amount of weight. And so I was like, that to me is kind of the end of the simple fasting dial. So OMAD is like kind of in the middle, between a normal societal practice, eating 3 meals a day plus snacks. Like OMAD is kind of right in the middle between that and alternate daily fasting. And for most people, not everybody, but most people, that's enough to get people moving in a very positive direction with it. 2 meals a day, I don't get results. Yes, yeah, people do have that experience. And so I consider that step 1 on the dial. Always try that first, because what if you did get results? Okay, then good. And then if you don't, okay, but then you've taken a step, get used to it, no problem. And then I say move toward the next step, right? And then it's balancing all these things. So OMAD can be the next step. If there's food choices to clean up, of course, that can be a step. The exercise is a step. Focusing on the microbiome, focusing on mental health and stress. Are there sources of stress in your life that you are not coping with in an effective way? And is that creating a hormonal structure that is hamstringing the benefits of everything else that you're trying to do? This is why I try to incorporate that into this whole thing, that we're trying to create a mental space of health and wellness as much as a physical space, because the two are so intrinsically connected. And I think that we haven't, appreciated the idea. Like there's this image I have in my mind of someone who is just, brute forcing their way to weight loss on a treadmill in a gym. And they're having success, right? But they're hating it, right? And I've talked to lots of people like this. They're working. And it's like, as soon as you reach the point where you fully burn out of it, and then people stop that, then they put the weight back on. And that's very common. I think what is happening in these talks, these papers where I've gone through how we can get this negative adaptation in the body. Okay. We do not want negative metabolic adaptation, which is where we're losing weight at a rate that is just slightly faster than the body is slowing down the metabolism. And that effect can happen with dieting, calorie restriction without fasting. It can happen with significant exercise. And it can happen with prolonged amounts of fasting. And so this to me is how we create the balance where we stay away from that. I don't do extreme amounts of fasting for people because I don't want to trigger that effect for people. Food is how we connect with people socially. I never want people to create dynamics where they're not eating at socially enjoyable times because they feel guilty about it. I've definitely, had people come in, to my practice where they've heard of fasting, they've tried to do it and they haven't liked it because they say, oh, this wrecks my relationships, or I felt like, oh, I couldn't eat at these times. And I'd be like, my whole perspective is like, we need to use this as a tool so that we can do aggressive dietary practice. I mean, I'm not going to tell anybody that it isn't hard to lose weight and that you don't need something aggressive. This is how I ended up at fasting, because it's basically the most aggressive and powerful practice that you can have to lose weight, okay? But because there's a lot of power on tap there, I say, hey, we can use it very flexibly. And this is the big key. Fasting doesn't have to be this rigid structure that you stick to every day and you tell your sister, like, I'm sorry, I'm on this regimen. I can't deviate from it. I'm just going to have to sit here and I won't ever have dinner with you again, or like whatever it is, or breakfast. I say, no, you identify first, what are the key social food experiences that bring joy and meaning and value to your life, and you always have that. I don't think I've ever told anyone. I never would, right? Say, "Oh, cancel some meal with your, loved ones because, like, it's more important that you lose weight." Like, that's like an awful message, you know? And so many diets are like that, right? So many people missing out on things that bring them joy. Very hard to stick with something like that. So take the regimen. You say you want to lean into an OMAD, just fine. But like, it doesn't have to be every day, and it doesn't have to be like during like key social times. Now, there's just no rules. There's very few rules, right? It could be every day. Like, you can move that meal. It doesn't have to be the same every day. And you say, okay, my friend is coming to town and we're going to have lunch. He's like, well, that could be your one meal if you really want to stick with it. But if you're like a type of person who doesn't want to skip dinner and your friend's coming for lunch, it's like, well, then don't do OMAD that day, then have lunch that day and have dinner that day and take an extra walk, or don't, but just don't stress about it, for goodness sake. Is that perspective making sense how I'm talking through it? Let me know. And have you done things like that in the past? Have you shaped eating in a way like that that helps you to find that line and that space, that helps you connect with friends and family, with food, have a positive relationship with food? This is part of, to me, what fasting is rebuilding a thoughtful, helpful relationship with food, where food is a partner, right? And not a crutch. A lot of times we're using food as a coping mechanism, as a tool, as a stress relieving tool, which it can be, right, in the short term, right? But then it creates a cycle, and we can become dependent on it in this cycle. And that is not a healthy cycle. And so fasting be a type of thing that help you break free from that. I don't want people stuck in some rigid eating routine. I don't want people stuck in dependency cycles with compulsive eating either. And so finding that space, that balance. Yeah, absolutely. So if you're at work during dinner, okay, here is like a win-win, right? It can be stressful at work. You've got tons to do. You've got to plan for it. You got to bring stuff. Is like to say lunch is going to be my meal. I'm going to be in a calm, centered space. Like one practice that I love as a weight loss practice is just mindfulness practice, right? Mindfulness practice, so often in our society, we're so distracted. We're on the phone while we're eating. We're watching TV, like all these things. We're not even looking at the food. Is like hard to understand. Like our satiety, right? How our body understands how much food we've eaten, how we come to feel full and satisfied after a meal is a process that involves all of our senses. Body is taking all this in, the taste, the smell, how we see it. We actually see the food coming in and we feel it. So practicing mindfulness, using all of our senses as we eat, a very, very good way to enjoy our food and be satisfied with it. Hard to do when you're eating at work, like has been my experience, where it's just like eat and go and all these things. So creating wherever is the most centered space where you can eat without distractions, focus on food, make that the meal. And so if lunch is that meal for you, this is perfectly wonderful. Many cultures in the world, like I was in Spain a few years ago, and, people, have a big lunch, and that's like a main meal there. And then they eat a lighter meal, later on. Or don't, some people. And so then take that win to work. Say, now you got some extra time. And I don't know, at people's work, that could, mean anything. But like, either you just got some extra space, read a book, take a little stress reliever at work on a break, and you don't have to worry about, okay, get all the food in, and then you don't have to worry about, oh, you ate, and then you feel like not working. It's like you've just got that extra space, and you can use it. And so one meal a day can be an incredible tool to simplify life, so much less planning and shopping and dishes and lunch coolers and all the stuff to work and all the logistics. and embrace that open space, and then dive in more on that lunch meal. And, that could also be just during the work week. Like, I don't obviously know, what is your schedule, but if, maybe you do that 5 days a week when you're at work, and then like on your off days, and then you say, maybe you go back to 2 meals or whatever you want. So find a balance like that. But yeah, it could be a perfect way to do it like that. All right, really appreciate the conversation. I think I probably wrap it up toward an hour here. This has been great. Really nice to have you all with me. Um, I love having the questions and the conversation, and whatever it is, right? The difficulty. Say, oh, I have difficulty with this. Bring that. I'm happy to try to help people think through how would you handle a situation like that. Not giving anybody any medical advice, of course. If you have any concerns about doing a fasting or anything, talk with your medical team about it. But I'm very interested in helping people troubleshoot a thing. How would you handle this sort of situation? What is the way you think about it? Um, the reasons I have the thoughts I do and perspectives I do about fasting is off the top of my mind for two reasons. Because I've done basically every type of fasting myself to try to really understand it, and I've experienced it and felt it and struggled through it. And I've sat with hundreds of people in weight clinics who are working on it and struggling with it. I help people lose weight any way that they can, including I've written hundreds of prescriptions for every type of weight loss medicine. So I have a lot of experience with that. I've never been terribly inspired by it. I help people exercise in any capacity that they can, which I'm a huge advocate of. I help people eat the healthiest food, but the fasting practice is the real power, and it's the real underlooked practice. But these ways that I'm answering your questions are based off what has worked for people to help people reframe the experience into a way that takes the pressure off, helps relate it to what's actually happening physiologically and hormonally in the body. And I think as we come to understand these things and see these things, I've seen people, even people who found it tremendously difficult to do, to sit with it and who are yet open to it. And just being open to it, even without doing it. Sometimes I describe that like walking along the river. Okay, you don't have to dive right into something. Someone say, oh, I hear you're talking about eating 1 meal a day. That sounds very intense. Okay, you don't have to jump in and do it. Stick with your 2 meals a day. You say, I'm not having the results I want, but you're thinking about it. You're building up the structure, okay? When the mind is working on this, and the body very capable of doing it. And maybe as you're thinking about that, and you're walking along the river, and then one day you say, oh, I'm going to give it a try. And then you try it, you say, oh, it's not so bad. Or you tried it, and you say, oh, it was so bad, but then you did it, and then you felt better. Or you just build it up like a skill over time. And that's why fasting is a practice, because it's something that you can learn to do, train the body to do, and as you do that, the body gains strength, just like lifting weights. You start lifting the little weights, and the body responds by building strength, and then you move forward in the future. So think of fasting like that. Opening up that space is like finding a greater metabolic strength, training and building out the ability of the system to use the energy that is within it. Very empowering process. And see that the strength is improving. Oh, didn't I miss one question in here? How do we know we're actually in a fat burning state? Yeah, that's a great question. A couple different ways that you can think about it. If you really want to get technical about it, most pharmacies now sell ketone strips. And ketones are formed when the body is actually accessing body fat out of storage. It will ultimately release them into the body as ketones. And so if you are producing ketones, you can be sure that this physiology is happening, where you are breaking down stored energy. I'll be honest, I mean, I think there can be some situations where I have people do that, like, it can be interesting to know, I mean, it's very interesting physiology, you can read about it, and then to see it, that can be helpful. Oh, I think you can order online also, there's little like a blood sugar monitor, there's, like, ketone monitors now, you can get it on blood also. I very rarely ever, have people do that. I don't really find that necessary. It's just interesting. If some person says, "Oh, I really wanna do that," I absolutely do it, and some people do want to do it. The more practical, way I approach that is to say, "Okay, are you opening up a fasting space? Are you feeling okay? Are you eating healthy food? You're moving around, you're doing these things, okay, and then what results are you getting?" Because ultimately, the point of this is like, if you're trying to lose weight, like, are you getting the results you want or not? Now, there can be a lot of fluctuation in the body, okay? And a pound or two, how much did you eat? How much did you drink? When did you use the bathroom? All these things can lead to some fluctuation. So we want to take, a weekly average over a couple weeks and say, is it working or not? If you're opening up some fasting space over a couple weeks and the weight's not changing, okay, another variable is, did you get more active? Are you building muscle? Muscle weighs more than fat. There's another variable in there, okay? But if we're not seeing changes in body composition, if the weight's not changing, if you're not losing weight, then it's hard to say in the bigger picture here. Like, we can't be getting very much fat burning going on, right? And so, like, if you really want to dial in within a day, say, am I getting into this space within a day? Okay, if you're doing a day-long fast, everybody who's doing a significant amount of fasting in the short term, out toward a day, I mean, is guaranteed. You're not going to not be doing that. If you're somewhere within a shorter fasting window and you really want to dial it in using some sort of monitoring, either a blood monitoring or a urine monitoring for ketones, that will give you that answer. If you want to kind of take the pressure off, make things less scientific, just kind of open things up, you give a couple weeks to whatever practice you're doing and saying, is it working or not? If it's working, okay, you're losing weight, okay, then okay, we're definitely getting into that space. And if the process is not working for you, well, it clearly isn't, And so then if you're in that space and you say, hey, look at the practices that I'm doing and nothing is happening, okay? Then you can say, okay, we've learned from this, okay? This is a practice that is not working, right, in its current form. Something has to change to do that. Sometimes I have a list of 180 videos that I want to make, and I somewhere perhaps I'll get in a zone where I can crank some of these out. But one of them is a fascinating paper that I found from Philadelphia, I believe Philadelphia General Hospital, I think from 1962, and is a fasting study. I've showed, I think, on the channel a couple times. There's some of these fascinating historical medical literature of fasting that has kind of popped up in these different, places. One of them was in the early 60s in Philadelphia. A couple docs there were helping people fast for different reasons. And one of it was for weight, okay? And in this study, they admitted healthy volunteers who are overweight to the hospital for a medically supervised week-long fast. They admitted the patients to the hospital room. Everybody got an IV. They're giving them IV fluids. Everybody is monitored. Nobody's eating anything. They're monitoring everything. Their blood pressure, their electrolytes, their urine output. They're just measuring all these people. And then basically the people sat around and played board games and watched TV and played cards and this sort of stuff. And, I think it's been a year or two since I read this paper. I got to bring it out. But, they admitted 20 people, put them on the medical unit. Everybody lost weight and everybody lost like 20 pounds, And then the study followed these people for a year, I think, afterward also. And, to me, that is fascinating. So there's a case of extended fasting as you dial toward that significant, level, I mean, everybody gonna lose weight because at that point, we're at physics. There's no nuclear reactor inside of the human body. We don't have a perpetual, energy generating machine. The body will use down the energy if it has to. That is definitely a way to completely break out if nothing else has worked. Some people say, I can't lose weight. It's impossible. I've tried everything. I was like, well, I'll give people that study. I was like, look what happened at Philadelphia General Hospital. Like they're like everybody losing weight. Now, I never suggest to anybody that they do that, right? I'm not going to admit somebody to the hospital for that. A certain kind of person could do that and would benefit from it. But I just say between wherever you are right now that is not working and this point, there absolutely is a point in between there that would also work, And so to use fasting as the tool to get there looks like moving out toward that thoughtfully and gently until you find that point. And some people say, well, that sounds too intense. So I never push anybody to say, never do anything. You say, oh, that feels too intense. Well, don't do it, for goodness sake. Is a balance between all the other things. And maybe you lean on that fasting edge for a while. And you say, that's about as far as I want to take it. It's like, maybe now is the time to lean on one of these other edges, the exercise edge. Someone says, okay, I exercised and it also didn't do anything. Okay, but did you exercise with this level of fasting space? See, it's a multivariate sort of thing. Maybe you did this exercise to a certain degree in the past, but now you've brought it into OMAD, Have you done it, like that? Now we get a synergistic effect, if you see what I'm saying. Okay, so these are all things that we could talk through over time, and people can share their experience, and we can have an ongoing dialogue about it. So I hope these thoughts are helpful, and I hope you have a great week. I will look forward to seeing you back here next week. Have a good one.